Hello?
47. There's been something
Goddamn
of a...
robocalls. Same number? The hell?
47. I need you
What?
to listen.
Why do you keep saying that number? What is this?
Chateau.
Diana.
Very good, 47. We've just been contacted by a new client in need of a video review.
What's the subject?
The Hitman series has seen a revival in recent years, releasing 2 games that return the series to its roots. The first, simply called Hitman, was released episodically, with one new location on a monthly basis. The follow-up, Hitman 2, was released just a few months ago in one installment. Both were developed by IO Interactive.
Sounds like my kind of job.
The client has also asked that we dispose of a few people.
Naturally.
Not to be melodramatic, 47, but this video could bring down the entire system. Are you sure you're ready?
I'm always prepared, Diana.
So, the Hitman series has been going for about 20 years now. There's a bit of a lull in the mid-2000s between the 4th and 5th entries, and some people were pretty disappointed with how the 5th one turned out. But they've seen a resurgence with the last 2 games, the first of which was simply titled Hitman.
I'm normally somewhat annoyed by this style of oversimplified sequel titles, but the first game had a subtitle, so it's not that easy to get confused between the two. Much like all the other mainline games, Hitman was developed by IO Interactive. This series is their bread and butter, and nearly the only thing they've worked on. Most notably, the only other series they've created is Kane and Lynch, and, well, that's probably best left forgotten.
Lynch, I need you to calm down.
Go fuck yourself, Kane! Fuck off home!
So Hitman and IO Interactive are basically inseparable. This latest game was actually going to be developed by a Square Enix studio, Square Enix being one of the publishers, but they ended up putting IO back on the job, which I think it's safe to say worked out in everyone's favor.
So, as a relative newbie to the series, I'm going to be reviewing Hitman and Hitman 2. I feel like the second game is more or less an extension of the first one, more so than your typical sequel. So I think it's fair to review them together, especially considering I played them from the same launcher.
When the sequel released, there were a few gameplay improvements that were retroactively added to the first game's levels in what was called the Legacy Pack, and players could essentially combine the 2 games into one. My feelings on this are a bit mixed because it can get pretty confusing figuring out what to purchase, but I'll dive into that a little later. Let's start with the release of Hitman. The game was released episodically, at the rate of 1 mission each month, roughly. Square Enix had success releasing Life is Strange in this format, and this was toward the tail end of the episodic release era, so it would be easy to say that the episodic release was their idea and that it's kind of trite, but honestly this format really works in the game's favor. Granted, it really only applies to the release window, since you can marathon the entire game once it's released, but it's easy to see how this format works in the game's favor. Every level in Hitman is densely packed with content. Good content. You can easily play each level 5 times and have enough left over to play it again, and the episodic release encouraged people to do so, not having another episode to immediately move on to. Another benefit of this type of release is the feedback. Rather than making an entire game and applying feedback to the sequel, IO was able to make changes much more immediately. So if you pick this game up, I would recommend really soaking up as much from each level as you can, because there really is a lot to see and do. Hitman 2 chose to forego this format and just release the whole game. According to the game's creative director, they did this so that people would have the choice to just blaze through the game if they wanted. Player choice is a term that's thrown around a lot these days, but IO is offering it for real here. From the open-endedness of each and every level, to deciding what order to play missions in, maybe skipping some entirely, you can really do whatever you want. And I suppose since it's a sequel, people might understand more that each level is meant to be played more than once. There are two major issues that linger over the games like annoying clouds. The first being the online-only system. Now, you can play this game offline if your internet is down or just generally not great, but there's some stuff you miss out on. For example, when you complete a mission, you're assessed on how well you did, and you progressively unlock new items, new starting areas, and places to smuggle in the items you unlock. But that's only if you're online. So you're going to want to play online so you can keep trying new things. If you're offline, you don't get to unlock any of this stuff. For most people, this isn't really an issue, but some people just don't have consistent internet, and the pros of being always online just don't outweigh the cons in my eyes. Another annoyance is the way saving works. At first I thought this was a result of being online and having to load saves from the cloud or something, but it seems about the same when playing offline. Basically, it takes time to save or load. It's not a lot of time, but if you're wanting to take a lot of risks, you'll want to save often, and the wait gets annoying. Anytime you want to save or load, you have to wait for the saves to be loaded, which takes about 6 to 10 seconds. Again, not a lot of time, but this is every time you want to save or load. A game like this should absolutely have quick saves. I realize that console controllers don't have as many buttons as a keyboard, but finding a place to put that command would be a worthy investment. If you're playing through this and a crazy, risky idea pops in your head, you're going to be much more likely to do it if you can just tap a button and instantly have a safety net to fall back on, rather than pressing a button, waiting 10 seconds, and then saving, at which point you may just think, maybe I won't blow that guy up. Perhaps as a way of compensating for this, the game has an autosave feature. And sometimes it's helpful, but the game doesn't always know when you're about to try something crazy or generally just want to save your progress, so you still have to manually save fairly often. As far as I can tell, the reason for being always online is either piracy prevention and/or forcing a live service model. Many people hope that with IO Interactive going independent after the first game, this system wouldn't be enforced the same in the sequel. They figured it was something Square Enix forced them to put in the game. Unfortunately, it's still in effect, and it's unlikely to change.
Then there's the combining of the two games into one launcher. On one level, this is pretty convenient. These two games play incredibly similarly, and putting them together just makes sense. But if you're like me, and you haven't played either game yet, figuring out what to buy can be downright confusing.
Okay, so we got Hitman 2, of course. Hitman Game of the Year Legacy Pack. A little wordy, not sure what. We got Hitman 2 Hantu port. I guess that's a sniper level or something. Hitman 2 Collector's Pack. Okay. Hitman Game of the Year Legacy Pack upgrade. Hitman Game of the Year Edition. Hitman Game of the Year Edition upgrade. Hitman Game of the Year Edition upgrade. Intro pack. Hitman Game of the Year Edition upgrade disc. What the fuck? What is it? Which one of these am I supposed to get? IO. Hitman has a plot. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't watch a single cutscene after the intro until I beat both games. See, the game has a timeline laid out, and you can choose the cutscenes independent of the missions. I just wanted to jump in and do Hitman things, so I didn't bother with the cutscenes. I only watched them afterwards for the purpose of this review, and I probably would not have watched them otherwise. It's fairly easy to understand generally what's going on without watching them, since each mission has a sort of intro cutscene that gives you info on your targets and sometimes the overall plot, and you'll sometimes be given more information within the mission. I will say these cutscenes are visually quite pleasant. I actually like the lighting and overall style quite a bit, but the actual subject matter did not grab me. There's a real political intrigue / spy thriller feel to the cutscenes that I'm just not into. It's kind of a personal bias, I guess, but I just feel there's too much person A from Organization B is planning to do C to D from Organization E before Organization F finds out about it. I'm bad at memorizing that kind of stuff, and organizations are just hard to care about, at least for me. It does start to get a little more interesting in the second game when the focus shifts to 47 a bit more, but there's a different issue. The cutscenes are basically storyboards. I'm guessing that when IO went independent, they didn't have the money to dedicate to animating the cutscenes, and while there are brief moments where the intrigue of the scene makes you forget about this, it usually serves to distract you from what the characters are saying or doing. And again, I'm not all that bothered about it because I'm not here for these cutscenes. Now on to what makes these games great, the actual gameplay. I said that these games allow you a lot of choice and freedom, and I wasn't kidding. I've mentioned before that a lot of other games today are massive and have a bunch of junk to do in them, and they like to think of themselves as sandboxes, but these Hitman games are proper sandboxes. They're smaller, but they're more densely packed with things that are actually interesting and engaging. These other open world games are like deserts with vast stretches of sand and little oases. It's oases. Oases of content in a sea of guff.
Each level in Hitman starts with a short scene introducing you to your environment, your target, and your basic reason for assassinating them. After that, you're left to your own devices. You can overhear a conversation or find some intel that'll lead you to a new disguise, an alternate pathway, or maybe a fun, interesting way to take out the target.
This doesn't always work out perfectly. Sometimes you just don't wander in the right direction and you can get 3 different leads to killing one target, but zilch for the other targets. Thankfully for those who want a bit of structure and guidance, the game has something called story missions. You can follow one of these stories to find your way to the targets if you're stuck, or just want a more guided experience. And they almost always pay off with an interesting kill.
Martinez is down.
It'll take you multiple replays just to get through these mission stories, and even after that there are a bunch of additional challenges that can be equally fun, and some of them can be quite challenging. And beyond that, you're limited only by your imagination. And there's always new stuff to find. I played the crap out of the first level in Hitman 1 and I just found out about a crazy costume I completely missed. I should mention that there was also some DLC released for the first game that basically remixed some of the levels and gave you new targets. Honestly, I only played about half of it. I've already explored the levels, there are no new mission stories included, with maybe a few interesting challenges to complete and a few new costumes. I didn't really get much out of what I played, and I had no desire to play the rest.
As I mentioned earlier, completing a mission gives you experience, unlocks new items, new starting areas. So if you complete mission stories, challenges, even coincidentally, it really speeds up the rate that you unlock those things. So it pays to be creative. It's more fun anyway.
Since the 2 games are in the same launcher, the item unlocks actually carry over to the missions in the second game. I could see this making things less interesting in the second game because I found that there were a couple items that I would always take because they just seemed generally much more useful than everything else. Lockpick. Picks locks. You can see why this would be one. Emetic poison. Target ingests, goes to bathroom, easy kill. I eventually realized it would be much more fun to get rid of these crutches and get more creative. This causes me to explore more of the level and find other things to help me take out my targets. So I think it might have been better to have 2 different stockpiles of items for the 2 games, but I can see why they didn't go that way. One major drawback of the episodic model the first game had is the potential of getting stuck with a crappy level for a month. Fortunately, I only had a real issue with one level. It had 4 targets and was an insane pain in the ass to get through as a result. But beyond that, the levels have a consistently good quality. Most of them have a nice sense of variety throughout them. One minute you'll be in a church cemetery, the next you're in an underground lab, and situated between them is a vacation-worthy beach scene, and that's maybe 50% of the level. And the design of these levels is really something. Every area interconnects really nicely. Can't get past someone without a frisk? Sneak in the back. Don't have anything to unlock this door? Jump in through the window. Don't have the disguise you need to get into an area? Climb up this pipe. As far as objectives, I will say that the missions that have only human targets tend to be the most enjoyable. When you're tasked with getting a key item or destroying an object, that can be kind of a chore. One other note about general gameplay stuff is the NPC voice acting. It seemed in the first game that they had a very small pool of actors, and I couldn't help but notice every time Spider-Man spoke.
How's your father?
Doing well, thanks for asking. He's upstairs right now working on this novel of his, some kind of political thriller, I think. It's awesome, right? I mean, shut up, don't I look like Hush or The Invisible Man or maybe Dark Man?
He's bought this island off the coast of Costa Rica.
What about Crystal Dawn? Any movement?
Granted, that was 2 years before Spider-Man released, but it's all I can hear now. So there's some other modes in the game as well, quite a few actually. I'll start with contracts and escalations, which are pretty similar. Contracts are basically user-created missions within the levels that already exist. You can go into a level, mark some targets, and create your own mission. Obviously, this can have incredibly mixed results. Some people can create some really good stuff, but on the other hand, you can get stuff like this. This is the trending page. The most popular last week page looks pretty similar, and there's no good way to sort all of the contracts, plus there's no rating system as far as I can tell. Escalations are created in pretty much the same way as contracts, but they're made by the developers. So there's generally a higher and more consistent quality to them, and there are definitely fewer gimmick levels. This brings me to the next mode, Elusive Targets. I got a real bone to pick with this mode. An elusive target mission is basically structured like a normal mission, but there are no mission stories, and most importantly, these missions are temporary. There's only a certain window of time that you can play any of these missions before they're just gone with the wind. I played exactly one of these. I did not enjoy it. First of all, it seems to be a one-shot type deal. No saves, no failure, and once you take the target down, that's it. You can't go back in and try another method. You're done. You don't get to play again. Not that I wanted to in my case. I played the Sean Bean level. It actually had me excited at first, as there's actually an interesting encounter toward the beginning. But once it opened up, I just couldn't find any interesting ways to kill this guy. And it just dragged on for so long. And I was walking on eggshells the whole time because I was afraid that failing would mean that I wouldn't be able to try again. I couldn't take any risks. So I ended up just shooting him in the head with a silenced pistol and extracting. Thrilling. Even putting aside the bad experience I had with this particular level, I can't get behind this mode. Either you get a bad level that you don't want to play because it'll only be around for a few days so it doesn't matter if it's poorly designed, or you get something that's actually fun to play, and then it's gone almost immediately. So fuck you if you've got something going on while the mission is live, I guess. This is just another facet of the live service model that so many games are adopting these days, and it makes so little sense here because there's already a full, rich game. I don't need all this extra fluff. If IO released just the campaign and nothing else until Hitman 3, that would be plenty. They of course have a season pass for Hitman 2 as well. It's $40. And if the extra missions for that are anything like the first game's DLC, that's a hard pass for me. There are actually still a couple modes still left, the first of which is the Sniper Challenge. At the moment there's only one level for this mode, and it's alright. It's admittedly deeper than it appears at first. The game doesn't really explain the minutiae of this mode at all, so you wouldn't be remiss to think you were just supposed to shoot all the targets. But there are a few additional challenges, and there is a bit of a puzzle element as you can actually eliminate people without alerting others. Overall, it's a harmless mode. I didn't love it, but it was fine.
So the final mode I want to talk about today is the multiplayer mode, Ghost mode. I kind of have mixed feelings about it.
In this mode, one player is pitted against another. Each player is given the same target, but they're basically in parallel levels separate from one another, so that one player doesn't suffer as a result of the other being raucous and sowing chaos.
Once one player takes out their target, the other player is given a small window in which to also kill their target. So once you kill your target, they have to remain unnoticed for about 10 seconds. And then 1 kill gets you 1 point. First to 5 wins.
I played a few rounds of this mode over the course of a week. The first match was excellent. The tension was palpable throughout the whole match. My opponent and I were constantly neck and neck. I managed to win the match by a single point and I was absolutely fucking pumped. I physically got out of my chair and paced around to burn off energy. The next round I played was about as far on the other end of the spectrum of enjoyment as you can get. The wrinkles of the mode really began to show. As far as I can tell, there's only 1 map available in this mode right now. It's still in beta, months after the release of the game, and you can really tell sometimes. At times it seems like target placement can be downright unintuitive in terms of being able to take them down discreetly. There were moments when I would stand and watch a target for minutes, watching him walk his full cycle just trying to find a good moment, and the other guy would watch with me until one of us eventually just killed him so we could move on to the next one. The announcements that go off saying time left to kill target or time till the next target can sometimes get confused and go off at the wrong time, which can be pretty confusing. There's also the slapdash nature of how the devs dealt with costumes, equipment, and locked doors. Outfits and weaponry are strewn throughout the level in crates, which may lead some to believe that you can't acquire these things normally in the level, especially since they're not placed around the level as they are in single player, but you can still knock out various NPCs and take whatever they've got. As for the locks, they're just gone. No locks. You can just go anywhere. No need for keys, lock picks, or crowbars. No alternate paths. Okay, well, maybe they just want you to be able to get to the target as quickly as possible. And yet, when you dip your toe into an area where you're trespassing, all bets are off. Guards will immediately go into full combat alert, and your current outfit is compromised. And should you die, you respawn, and people still remember your transgressions. So the second round I played featured the worst of all these transgressions, and neither I nor the other player were making any headway, so I eventually just said fuck it and dropped out. Had this been my first round, it may have ended there, but because the first round was so good, I wanted to give it a fair shake. The following match was about the same, though I think the other player did manage to finally win in the end, which I was glad for because I was truly tired of playing by then. The last match I played was much better than the previous two. The other player and I were similarly matched, and the problems from before didn't rear their ugly heads too much, and I came out ahead. That definitely helps. But overall, this mode's a real mixed bag with a lot of great potential. If they iron out some of the bugs, and step up the design of this level, and incorporate the other levels, then this could be a ton of fun. Right now, it's pretty inconsistent. The core component of these games, the main campaign, is great. I absolutely had a blast on almost every level. It's a shame that IO felt the need to throw in all this other stuff around the core game that really doesn't add much to the overall experience and serves mostly as an afterthought. The game as a whole just feels a little messier as a result.
I would definitely still recommend playing these games. I wouldn't worry about the other modes so much, but the campaign can provide hours and hours of entertainment, really however much time you want to put in.
IO is almost certainly going to put out a third game in this new series, and even though it will likely be more of the same, I gotta say I'm looking forward to playing it because what they've got is pretty damn good.